The knock at the door. The night was cold and silent. Snow fell in small flakes, covering the broken ground outside the cabin. The human survivor sat near a dying fire, his hands wrapped around a tin cup of warm water. His name was Darren, and he lived alone at the edge of the ruined settlement. The world had been at war for too long, and now only shadows of life remained. He had grown used to silence, used to nights where the only sound was the wind scratching against wood and stone. But tonight was different. Tonight, the silence broke. It came as a knock, soft at first, almost like the wind had tricked his ears. He froze, his heart slowing. No one ever came to his cabin at this hour. Not in this place. He waited, holding his breath. Then it came again, louder. 3 sharp knocks that echoed against the door. Darren set down the cup, his hand moving to the rifle resting by the fire. He stood, every muscle tight, his eyes fixed on the door. Who would come here? And why? Slowly, he walked across the small room, the floor creaking under his boots. He lifted the latch with care, and the door groaned open. What he saw stunned him. There, standing in the snow, was a woman, but she was no ordinary woman. Her skin glowed faintly blue under the moonlight, her hair dark and tangled with frost. Her eyes were large, golden, and filled with fear. She was beautiful but broken, her shoulders heavy as if the weight of the world pressed down on them. Behind her stood 3 small figures, children, half hidden under a ragged blanket. They clung to her legs, their faces pale, their eyes shining with the same golden light. Her lips trembled as she spoke, her voice weak but clear. "Please, human," she whispered. "Please, I beg you, do not turn me away." Darren said nothing, his grip on the rifle firm. He had seen her kind before, alien settlers who once came with promises but stayed with war. Many humans hated them, blamed them for the destruction, and yet here she stood, not as an enemy, but as a widow with children. She lowered her head, her breath steaming in the cold. "My husband is gone," she said softly. "My children have no one. They are hungry, they are cold. They need a father. They need someone to keep them alive." Her voice cracked, and her body shook. "I will warm your bed, human. I will give you everything. But please, do not leave us to die." Darren felt the words cut through the silence of his heart. He looked at the children, their small hands gripping the blanket, their eyes wide with fear and hope. They were not soldiers, not threats, just little ones trembling in the snow. His breath caught, and for the first time in months, he felt the weight of choice. The wind howled behind them, pushing snow into the cabin. The fire flickered low, casting shadows across the floor. Darren stepped aside slowly, his voice quiet but steady. "Come in," he said, "before the cold takes you." The woman's eyes widened, surprise and relief shining like fire. She pushed the children forward gently, guiding them into the small cabin. Their bare feet left marks on the wooden floor, melting snow as they entered. Darren closed the door behind them, sealing out the night. The warmth of the fire touched their faces, and the children huddled near it instantly. They stretched their small hands to the flames, sighing with soft relief. The woman stood still, her body stiff, her eyes on Darren. "You do not trust me," she said quietly. "I can see it." He gave no answer, only moved to the fire, throwing another piece of wood into the flames. The sparks rose, filling the cabin with orange glow. Finally, he looked at her, his voice hard. "Why me?" he asked. "Why knock at my door?" She held her arms close, her fingers shaking. "Because you are alone," she said. "Because others would kill us on sight." Her eyes dropped to the children, then back to him. "I saw you once, in the market ruins. You gave food to an old man even when you had little." Her lips trembled. "You are not like the others, human. You still carry mercy." Darren said nothing for a long moment. Her words stirred something in him, something buried deep under scars and silence. He studied her face, the tears frozen on her cheeks, the faint glow of her skin. She was alien, yes, but her fear was human. Her plea was human, and the children's eyes, innocent, hungry, were the same as any child's. The fire cracked, breaking the silence. Finally, Darren placed the rifle aside. He nodded once, slow, measured. You may stay tonight, he said, but tomorrow, we decide what comes next. Relief washed over her face, her knees shaking as she lowered herself to the floor. She pulled her children close, wrapping the blanket around them. The golden glow of their eyes softened as they drifted toward sleep. She looked up at Darren one last time, her voice a whisper. Thank you. Darren sat back in his chair, his gaze still sharp. He watched her, watched the children. Part of him warned this was danger, a trap, but another part, the part that still remembered humanity, whispered something else. This was the beginning of something he could not yet see. The night grew darker, the wind outside screamed against the cabin walls, and in the silence between fire and breath, Darren wondered if opening that door had changed everything. The plea. The fire burned low, filling the cabin with soft light. Darren sat silent in his chair, the rifle resting close, his eyes never leaving the woman and her children. They huddled near the flames, the children pressing against their mother, their small bodies shaking less now that warmth touched them. The room smelled of wet snow melting from their skin and clothes, mixed with the faint smoke of burning wood. For a long time no one spoke. Only the fire crackled, only the wind outside howled against the walls. Then the woman lifted her head, her golden eyes meeting his. Her voice trembled, soft but steady. You wonder why I came to you, why I risked knocking at your door? Darren did not answer, but his silence gave her space. She placed her hand on the head of the smallest child, brushing tangled hair back from his face. My husband is gone, she said. He fought in the last battle near the river. He never returned. Her voice broke, but she forced it steady again. The children cry for him at night, but he will never answer. They have no father now, and I cannot do this alone. Her words hung in the cabin like heavy stone. Darren's jaw tightened, his eyes lowered to the fire. He had heard many pleas in his life, most filled with lies, some filled with need, but this one carried something different. It carried the weight of truth. She leaned forward, her voice sharper now, more desperate. Others would kill us on sight. They would not listen. But you, human, I saw mercy in you once. I saw you share food with a stranger when you yourself were hungry. Her golden eyes burned with quiet fire. That is why I came. Not because you are strong, not because you are alone, but because you still carry something the rest have lost. You carry compassion. The words cut deeper than Darren expected. He tried to push them away, tried to keep his heart cold, but the children shifted near the fire, and one of them looked up at him with wide eyes. There was no hate there, no war, only hunger and hope. Still, he kept his voice firm. You ask much, he said, to feed you, to shelter you, to protect children who are not mine. It is not a small thing. The woman bowed her head, her hands tightening round the blanket. I know, she whispered. That is why I give myself to. I will warm your bed. I will share your burdens. I will do whatever you ask. Only let my children live. Her words struck him like a hammer. For a moment the fire seemed louder, the cabin smaller. He looked at her, this widow with glowing skin, offering herself not out of love, but out of desperation. It was not beauty that filled the room. It was sacrifice, raw and sharp. He hated it, hated that she was forced to beg like this, hated the world that left her with no other choice. Darren rose, his shadow stretching long across the cabin wall. He paced slowly, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. You think I can give them what they need? He asked. You think I can be their father when I can barely keep myself alive? She lifted her chin, meeting his hard gaze. Yes, she said without hesitation, because you are human, and that is enough. The words stopped him mid-step. He stared at her, stunned. Aliens had called humans many things: violent, weak, stubborn, but never had he heard one call humanity enough. It shook him more than he cared to admit. The children stirred, their small voices breaking the silence. Mother, one whispered, is he going to send us away? Her hand stroked the child's head gently, her eyes never leaving Darren's. That is for him to decide, she said softly. The boy's eyes turned to Darren, wide and searching, not a soldier's eyes, not an enemy's eyes, only a child's eyes asking for a chance. Darren felt his chest tighten, his grip on his own control slipping. He turned back to the fire, staring into the flames. The crackle filled the silence between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "You may stay. For now." The widow's breath left her in a rush, her shoulders trembling with relief. The children sighed, pressing closer to the fire. But Darren lifted his hand sharply, his tone firm. "Do not mistake this for trust. I know nothing of you, and danger follows you. If trouble comes, I will not hesitate to end it." Her eyes softened, a strange mix of sadness and respect. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "But thank you, human. Thank you for giving us one more night." The fire burned brighter for a moment as if answering. Outside, the wind screamed louder, carrying the sound of distant engines across the frozen dark. Darren's head snapped toward the door, his eyes narrowing. He was not sure if the sound was real or just his mind, but one truth pressed heavy on him: danger was never far. He looked at the widow, at the children huddled by the flames. Already, their presence had changed the silence of his cabin. Already, they had pulled him into something larger than his own survival. He clenched his jaw, sat back down, and rested the rifle across his knees. Whatever plea she carried, whatever promise she gave, he knew one thing: by opening the door tonight, he had stepped into a story that would not end easily. The children. The morning came slow. Pale light slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, touching the floor in thin lines. Darren had not slept. He sat with the rifle across his knees, watching the fire fade into ash. The alien widow lay near the children, her arms around them, her head resting against the wood. For the first time since she entered, her breathing was calm, her face soft in sleep. But the children did not sleep. One by one they stirred, their golden eyes opening, white and bright even in the dim cabin. They whispered softly to one another, their voices carrying the musical tone of their mother's speech. Darren studied them from his chair, silent, unmoving. He expected fear, but what he saw was something else. The smallest child, no older than 5, curled closer to the fire, his thin hands stretched toward the warmth, his skin glowing faintly blue. He turned his head and met Darren's eyes. For a long moment, they stared at one another, human and alien, to being shaped by war. The boy tilted his head, curious. Then, in a voice soft and clear, he asked, "Are you going to send us away?" Darren felt his chest tighten. He looked at the boy, at the sharp bones under his skin, at the hunger in his cheeks. The words came slow, steady. "No, not today," he said. The boy's lips curved into a small smile, quick and fragile. He curled back to his siblings and whispered something that made them all glance at Darren. Their eyes were wide, unsure, but filled with something that looked almost like hope. The eldest, a girl near 12, stood carefully, her blanket falling from her shoulders. She stepped forward, her golden eyes steady though her hands trembled. "My name is Nur," she said softly. "This is Kal, and this is Tavi." Her voice wavered, but did not break. "Mother told us humans hate us, but you let us in." She paused, her gaze sharp. Why? Darren did not answer at once. The question burned in the air. Why had he opened the door? Why had he not sent them into the snow? He shifted in his chair, his jaw tight. "You knocked," he said simply, "and you begged. No machine begs, no soldier begs, only people do." Nira tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to weigh his words. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she gave a small nod. "Then you are different from the others," she whispered. The middle child, Kal, clung to her hand, his eyes fixed on Darren with fear. He did not speak, but his small body shook as if expecting pain. Darren saw it, and anger stirred in him, not at the child, but at the world that had taught someone so young to fear every shadow. The widow stirred then, waking slowly. Her eyes opened, catching sight of her children standing before Darren. She pushed herself up, panic flashing across her face. But when she saw they were safe, she breathed out and placed a hand over her chest. "They should not bother you," she said quickly. "They do not know how to behave." Darren shook his head, his voice low but firm. "They are not a bother," he said. "They are children." The words silenced the room. The widow blinked, her golden eyes softening. Her children turned to her, as if seeking her approval. She gave a faint nod, and they settled back by the fire. Though their eyes never stopped watching Darren, hours passed slowly. Darren gave them what food he had left: a small loaf of hard bread and a bit of dried meat. The children ate with quiet desperation, breaking the bread into tiny pieces so each had a share. Darren watched, his stomach tight. He had eaten that way once, long ago, after raids, when food was life and hope was small. As they ate, he saw more of them, not just their hunger, but their spirit. Nur, the eldest, tried to give the largest piece to her younger brother, though he pushed it back to her. Tavi, the smallest, giggled softly when the warmth of the fire tickled his fingers. Call sat closest to their mother, but his eyes kept drifting toward Darren, studying him with cautious curiosity. For the first time since the war, Darren felt something shift inside him. Not trust, not yet, but a strange pull. He had spent years surviving alone, telling himself that was enough. But here, in his small cabin, 3 fragile lives looked to him, not as an enemy, but as something else, a protector, maybe even a father. The silence broke when the widow spoke, her voice quiet but heavy. "They are all I have left," she said. "If they die, I die too." Her eyes locked on Darren's, steady and pleading. "I cannot fight for them alone. I cannot keep them alive. But you can." Darren's hand tightened on the rifle, his mind torn. Every instinct told him to send them away before danger followed. But when he looked at the children, at their glowing eyes and trembling hands, the words would not leave his mouth. The wind outside grew louder, a storm rolling over the snow. The cabin creaked under the weight of it. Inside, the fire burned low, but the glow in the children's eyes was brighter than any flame. Darren realized the truth. By opening the door last night, he had not just let strangers in, he had let responsibility in. He leaned forward, his voice rough. "If you stay, the world will see me as a traitor," he said. "Both humans and aliens will want me dead." The widow's voice answered without hesitation. "Then we will die together," she said, "or we will live together. But I will not walk away." The children pressed against her sides, their eyes wide, their hearts beating fast. Darren stared at them, his jaw set. The fire cracked once, filling the silence, and in that moment, he knew he had already chosen. He would not send them away. The bond had begun, not with love, not with trust, but with hunger, fear, and a knock at the door. Asterisk the threat. The storm lasted through the night. Snow piled against the cabin walls. Howling winds rattled the shutters, and the roof creaked under the weight. Inside, the fire fought hard to keep its glow, filling the small room with warmth. The widow and her children slept close together near the hearth, their breathing soft, their golden eyes dim in dreams. Darren did not sleep. His rifle lay across his lap, his ears listening past the storm. At dawn the wind died, silence returned. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting, heavy, sharp, like the world was holding its breath. Darren opened the door carefully, snow falling inward as the hinges groaned. The land outside stretched white and endless. But he saw what he feared. Footprints, fresh and heavy, pressed deep into the snow, circling his cabin. He crouched low, studying them. Too large for the widow's children, too wide for her feet. These were boots, human boots, and not his own. Someone had been here in the night, watching, listening, waiting. Darren's jaw tightened. He followed the tracks a few steps before turning back, his instincts sharp. Whoever had left those prints would return, and not alone. The world had grown cruel, and secrets were never safe for long. When he stepped back inside, the widow was awake, her children stirring beside her. She saw his face, the hard lines, the rifle in his hands. "What is it?" she asked, her voice already trembling. "Trex," he said. "Someone knows you are here." Fear rippled through her eyes. "They will tell the others," she whispered, pulling her children close. "They will call us traitors." Darren finished, His voice flat. The truth hung in the cabin like smoke, choking the air. Nearer, the eldest looked between them, her small hands gripping the blanket. "They will take us," she said quietly, "like they took father." The widow hushed her, pressing a finger to her lips, but the fear in her daughter's voice lingered, echoing in Darren's chest. By midday, the snow outside was broken again. Darren saw them from the window, 3 figures moving slow across the white ridge. Human scavengers, armed, wrapped in furs, their eyes sharp as wolves. They stopped often, scanning the land, their steps leading toward the cabin. Darren cursed under his breath, pulling the shutter closed. "They are coming," he said, his voice low. The widow's arms tightened around her children, her golden eyes wide. "You said they would see you as a traitor," she whispered. "What will you do?" Darren checked the rifle, the knife on his belt, the last magazine of bullets. "What I must," he said. The scavengers did not knock. They pounded on the door with fists and boots, shouting over the wood. "Darren," one of them barked, "we know you're in there. Open up." The children whimpered. The widow held them close. Darren stood still, his breath steady, his finger brushing the trigger. The voice came again, sharper, crueler. "We saw tracks. We know what you're hiding. You let one of them in, didn't you?" The word "them" was spit like poison, filled with hate. "If you give her up, we walk away. No fight, no blood." The widow's body shook, her golden eyes pleading. She whispered, "Please." Though she did not finish the words, Darren did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the door. The pounding grew louder, angrier. "Open up, Darren, before we burn the cabin with you in it." He breathed slow, forcing calm into his veins. This was the threat he had feared, the weight of choice pressing down on him. Behind him, 3 children waited. Not soldiers, not enemies, only children. He turned his head slightly, meeting the widow's gaze. Her lips trembled, but she did not beg again. She only looked at him with eyes that carried both fear and trust. Darren lifted the rifle, his voice hard as iron. "Stay quiet," he said to her. "Whatever happens, stay quiet." The door rattled, the lock cracking under the fists outside. The cabin felt smaller, the air thicker, the fire dimmer. Darren's heart beat like a drum, not with fear, but with decision. He had chosen the night he opened the door. Now he would stand by it. The voices outside turned into laughter, sharp and cruel. "You've lost your mind, Darren," one shouted. "A human protecting an alien widow. You'll die for her, and so will those freak children." Darren's eyes narrowed, his hand steady. "Better to die human," he whispered, "than live as nothing." The lock snapped. The door cracked. Snow and light poured inside. Shadows of men filled the frame, weapons gleaming. The widow gasped, clutching her children tight. Darren stepped forward, rifle raised, his body between the invaders and the family behind him. In that moment, the world outside fell silent again. The storm had passed, but another storm had just begun, and Darren knew this was only the first wave. The real war was still coming. The bond. The cabin was quiet again. The scavengers had left after hours of shouting and pounding on the door, leaving threats carved into the silence. They promised they would return with more men, and their words lingered like smoke in the air. But for now, the danger was gone. Only the echo remained. Darren sat by the fire, his rifle across his lap, his hand steady though his heart still beat heavy. The widow sat on the floor near her children, her arms wrapped around them, her golden eyes watching the flames. The children huddled close, their faces pale from fear, their eyes wide. Slowly, the room began to breathe again. Hours passed before anyone spoke. The storm outside had ended, leaving the world frozen and still. The fire cracked, filling the silence. Finally, the widow lifted her head, her voice soft but clear. "You stood between them and us," she said. "Why?" Darren did not answer at once. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the fire. He remembered the pounding fists, the cruel voices, the promises of death. He remembered the 3 small figures trembling behind him, and he remembered the choice he had already made. The night he opened the door, at last he said, "Because you asked, because you begged." and no one should beg for life and be denied. Her golden eyes shimmered, tears gathering. Others would have given us up without thought, she whispered. But you did not. You are different. The children shifted closer, their eyes locked on him. The smallest, Tavi, crawled forward, clutching the corner of the blanket. He reached out a small glowing hand, touching Darren's boot. You are not like the others, the boy whispered. You did not hate us. Darren looked down, his breath catching. He wanted to pull away, to keep the distance, but he could not. The boy's touch was small, fragile, yet it carried more weight than any weapon. It carried trust. The widow watched, her lips trembling. For the first time since she entered the cabin, she smiled, faint and fragile. They see you as something I cannot give them, she said. They see you as safe. The fire burned lower, the glow soft across the wooden walls. Darren leaned back, setting the rifle aside. He had carried it like armor, but now it felt heavy, unnecessary. At least for this moment, he sighed, his voice rough. I am no father, he said. I do not know how to be one. The widow's gaze was steady, her voice strong despite her exhaustion. You do not need to know, she said. You only need to care. Her words struck him deep. He thought of his own father, a man long gone, a man who had given his life in the early days of the war. He remembered the lessons, the stories by the fire, the hand on his shoulder that made him believe he could survive. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps care was enough. The children slowly relaxed, their fear fading into the warmth. Nearer, the eldest spoke quietly, her voice more confident than before. You protected us, so I will help you, she said. I can cook, I can clean, I can take care of Tavi. Her words were not the words of a child, but of someone forced to grow too fast. Darren nodded once, respect in his eyes. Then we work together, he said. The bond grew not in words, but in small actions. That night, Darren shared the last of his food, watching as the children ate slowly, making sure each had enough. When the youngest grew tired, he helped settle them by the fire, tucking the blanket around their small forms. The widow watched him, her golden eyes soft. You act as if they are yours already, she whispered. He shook his head, his voice low. No, they are not mine, but they deserve to live, and that is reason enough. Later, when the children slept, the widow moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I know this puts you in danger, she said. I know you may lose everything for keeping us here, but you did not turn us away, and for that, I owe you my life. Darren met her gaze, his expression unreadable. I did not do it for debt, he said. I did it because it was right. The fire dimmed to embers. The night stretched long. Outside, the world waited, full of threats. But inside the cabin a fragile peace grew. It was not perfect, not safe, but it was real. For the first time in years, Darren felt something stir inside him. Something he thought the war had taken forever. A sense of family. The widow leaned back against the wall, her voice soft as she drifted toward sleep. You do not see it yet, she whispered, but they already call you father in their hearts. Darren sat in silence, his rifle close, his eyes on the sleeping children. He did not know if her words were true, but he knew this whatever storm came next, he would stand between it and them, because in this broken world, that was what it meant to be human. Asterisk the betrayal. The days after the storm were uneasy. The scavengers had not returned, but Darren knew they would. They were the kind of men who could smell weakness, and they had seen something in him they would not forget. He kept his rifle close, his knife always sharp, his eyes always on the horizon. Inside the cabin, life was changing. The children laughed sometimes now, their small voices filling the wooden walls. They played with sticks in the firelight, whispering games that mixed their alien words with human ones. The widow worked quietly, mending torn clothes, cleaning, keeping the cabin alive. But behind it all, there was tension, heavy and sharp. At night, Darren would hear her voice, soft, low, like she was speaking to someone unseen. The first time, he thought it was a dream, but the second time, he sat up and listened. Her words were not in human tongue. They were in the flowing sound of her people's language. Her glow flickered faint in the dark as she whispered. Her hand pressed against the wall. Darren's chest grew tight. His thoughts heavy. Was she calling for help? Was she leading others to his door? The thought twisted in his mind like a knife. He had opened his cabin, his fire, his life. Had he also opened it to betrayal? The next morning, he confronted her. He stood by the fire, rifle in his hands, his eyes sharp. "You were speaking last night," he said flatly. Her golden eyes widened, her lips parting. "I was praying," she whispered. "My people spoke to the stone, to the sky, to the wind. I do the same. It is not betrayal." His grip tightened on the rifle. "Words can be signals," he said, "and signals bring death." Her body shook, tears burning in her eyes. "You think I would risk my children," she said, her voice cracking. "You think I would beg for your mercy only to sell it?" The children stirred, fear on their faces as they looked between them. Nera clutched her brothers, pulling them close. "Please," she whispered, "do not fight." Silence filled the cabin, thick and sharp. Darren lowered the rifle, but the doubt remained. Every sound outside, every flicker of light, every whisper in the dark, it all pressed against his mind. He wanted to believe her, but trust was a fragile thing in a world built on betrayal. That night, the scavengers returned. Their torches burned against the snow. Their voices carried through the frozen air. "Darren," one called, cruel and loud, "we warned you. And now it is time." The children whimpered. The widow pulled them close. Darren's chest tightened, his hands steadying on the rifle. Through the crack in the shutter, he saw more of them this time. Not 3 but 6, armed with blades and spears, their faces twisted with hunger and hate. They circled the cabin like wolves, the laughter sharp in the night. "You have one chance," the leader shouted. "Send her out. Send her brats out. And you live, refuse, and you burn with them." The words cut through the cabin like fire. The widow's eyes filled with terror, but she did not beg. Instead, she looked at Darren, her voice soft but steady. "You must choose," she whispered, "us or them." The children clung to her, their golden eyes locked on him. It was the moment of truth, the weight of betrayal pressing from both sides. If he gave them up, he lived. If he kept them, he died. The scavengers pounded on the walls, shouting, jeering, their voices filled with venom. Darren's breath came slow, steady. He had always lived for himself, alone. But when he looked at the widow, when he saw the children trembling in her arms, something inside him refused to break. He stepped forward, his voice sharp as steel. "You will not touch them," he shouted back. "If you want blood, take mine first." The cabin fell silent. Even the scavengers paused at the sound of his words. The widow's eyes widened, tears spilling. The children gasped, their fear breaking into something else, something closer to hope. Outside, the scavengers cursed, their voices rising again. "Then you have chosen death," they shouted. "And death you will have." They pulled back, gathering fire, preparing to burn the cabin down. Darren checked the rifle, checked the knife, checked the last bullets in the magazine. He knew the fight was coming. He knew he might not live to see another dawn. But he also knew this he had chosen, and that choice was his alone. He turned back to the widow and her children, his voice steady despite the storm outside. "They want betrayal," he said, "but they will find only resistance." The widow's golden eyes glowed bright in the firelight. "You risk everything," she whispered. "For us, for family," he answered, the word rough on his tongue. But true. The pounding outside grew louder, the torches brighter. The final stand was close. Inside the cabin, a fragile bond had survived suspicion, had survived fear. And in the face of betrayal, Darren had chosen something greater. The final stand. The night burned with fire. Torches lit the snow outside the cabin, their flames dancing against the dark. The scavengers shouted, their voices cruel, their laughter sharp. Inside, the cabin shook under the pounding on the walls. The children huddled near the fire, their golden eyes wide with fear. The widow held them close, her body trembling, but her gaze locked on Darren. He stood tall, rifle in his hands, knife at his belt. His jaw was set, his eyes steady. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. If this was his last night, it would not be one of surrender. The pounding grew louder. "Burn him out," one of the scavengers shouted. "Burn them all." Shadows moved against the window. Flames pressed against the wood. Smoke curled at the edges of the door. The children whimpered, the youngest hiding his face in his mother's arms. Darren's heart pounded, but his voice was calm. "Stay behind me," he said, "no matter what happens." The widow's lips trembled, but she nodded, her golden eyes glowing in the dim light. The door burst open, snow and smoke rushing in. The first scavenger stepped through, torch in hand, his face twisted with hate. Darren fired. The rifle cracked like thunder. The man fell. Chaos erupted. Shouts filled the night. More poured in, blades gleaming. Darren moved like a storm. Every shot counted, every strike fierce. The cabin roared with battle, the firelight flashing across steel and blood. He fought not for himself, but for the family pressed against the wall behind him. The widow's cry echoed, sharp and fierce. She grabbed a burning log from the fire, striking at the men who came too close. Her glow flared, her veins burning bright, her body trembling with power she had tried to hide. The scavengers stumbled at the sight, their eyes widening, which, one shouted, "Monster." But she did not stop. Her children were behind her, and she would not let them fall. Darren's bullets ran dry. The rifle clicked empty. He tossed it aside, pulling the knife free. The fight turned close, blood and breath mixing in the frozen air. Every strike was survival, every move desperate. His arm burned, his chest ached, but he did not fall. Not while they watched him, not while they depended on him. The scavengers set fire to the cabin walls, flames climbing fast, smoke thickened. Choking the air, the children coughed, their small bodies shaking. The widow pulled them close, her golden eyes burning through the haze. She reached for Darren, her voice breaking. "They will kill us all, unless I burn too." Her glow flared brighter, her body trembling as she reached for the fire itself. Darren saw what she meant, his chest tightening. "No," he shouted, "you will not give yourself to them. Not like this." Her tears glowed on her violet skin, her voice shaking. "I was made to burn." "Darren, maybe this is the only way." He caught her arm, pulling her close, his voice hard as iron. "You are not their weapon. You are not their sacrifice. You are a mother, and you are mine to protect." The words stunned her. Even as the flames roared higher, for the first time, no one had called her weapon. No one had called her curse. Someone called her human. The scavengers pressed forward again, their blades flashing in the smoke. Darren roared, charging with the knife, striking with every ounce of strength left in him. The widow joined him, her glow flaring, her hands pushing waves of heat that knocked men back. Together, they became something more than survivors. They became fury. They became defiance. One by one the scavengers fell, some fleeing into the snow. Their courage burned away. The cabin walls groaned, flames tearing through the beams. Darren grabbed the children, shouting out, "Now move." The widow lifted Tavy in her arms. Nearer and Call clung to Darren's coat. They burst through the broken door into the frozen night. Behind them, the cabin collapsed, fire swallowing the wood. The snow hissed under falling embers, the air thick with smoke. The scavengers who had survived fled into the dark, their torches vanishing one by one. Silence returned, broken only by the crack of burning wood. Darren stood in the snow, his chest heaving, his knife still in hand. The widow pressed the children close, her eyes fixed on the man who had stood for them. "You fought for us," she whispered. "You chose us." Darren's voice was rough, his body trembling from exhaustion. "I told you," he said. "You begged like a human, and no human plea goes unanswered." The fire behind them roared louder, sending sparks into the sky. The cabin was gone, their shelter turned to ash. But in the snow, in the glow of embers, something stronger stood. Not a man alone, not an alien widow abandoned, not children without hope, but a family forged in fire, found by choice. The widow reached for his hand, her grip warm, steady. Her golden eyes met his, shining with something beyond fear, something closer to trust, something closer to love. The children pressed against them, their eyes wide, but no longer filled with terror. For the first time, they believed tomorrow could come. Darren looked at the horizon, smoke rising into the starless sky. The war was not over, more threats would come. But tonight, they had survived, and in the ashes of his cabin, he found something worth more than survival. He found a reason to fight. The snow fell soft around them, covering the blood, covering the fire, and Darren whispered into the cold night, "They are not my blood, but they are mine, and I will never let them go."